The bright studio lights bathed the colorful set of The View in warmth as the opening theme played. The audience clapped enthusiastically, and the camera swept past the smiling hosts at the semicircular table. Joy Behar sat in her usual spot, red blouse striking against the backdrop, already brimming with energy before the introductions were even over. She leaned into the conversation as if she had been waiting all week for this moment. "Listen," she began, voice sharp and animated, "the problem isn't just the policy, it's the absolute madness of the people defending it." Her hands flew in wild gestures, punctuating every syllable. The audience chuckled in spots, unsure whether they were laughing with her, or nervously at her. Ana Navarro smirked and sipped her coffee, glancing sideways at Sunny, who was already taking notes. Whoopi, chair swiveling slightly, gave a half smile and muttered, "Here we go," under her breath, though her microphone caught it just enough for a few audience members to hear. Joy continued, her tone rising. "And I'm telling you, if we don't call out these lunatics for what they are, we might as well hand them the keys to the country and say, 'Here, drive us straight off the cliff.'" The studio reacted with a mix of laughs, gasps, and an awkward cough from somewhere in the back row. A camera operator, sensing the tension, zoomed in for a tight shot of Joy's intense expression. The moment was electric, lively, yes, but there was a dangerous edge in the air. From Sunny's side of the table, a subtle but unmistakable shift occurred. She straightened her posture, her pen pausing mid-scribble, her eyes locking on Joy with the look of someone ready to step into the ring. The audience, too, seemed to sense it. Something more than just morning banter was about to unfold. Joy was mid-sentence, voice growing sharper, when Sunny Hostin placed her pen down deliberately on the table. The metallic click against the wood was soft, but in the controlled chaos of live television, it was enough to draw attention. Sunny lifted her hand slightly, not in a frantic, "I need to talk" way, but in the calm, almost lawyerly manner that said, "I'm about to make my point, and I'm going to make it count." "Joy," Sunny began, her tone measured and smooth, "I think we need to pause for a second and address how extreme that sounds." The studio's energy shifted instantly. The audience murmured softly, some leaning forward in their seats. A few nervous laughs bubbled from the back rows, as if unsure whether this was playful banter or the opening bell for something more serious. Joy blinked, the corners of her mouth twitching in something between a smirk and a challenge. "Extreme, or just brutally honest," she shot back, leaning one elbow on the table. Her voice carried the confidence of someone who had spent decades in front of cameras, and the stubbornness of someone who rarely backed down. Sunny, unfazed, kept her tone steady. "There's a difference between honest and sounding like you've lost all sense of proportion." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't lean forward aggressively. She simply let the statement sit in the air like a drop of ink in water, spreading and staining the mood of the room. The audience reacted with an audible ooh, some gasping, others exchanging wide-eyed glances. The camera quickly cut to Whoopi, whose expression was a mix of amusement and, "Oh no, not again," as she instinctively reached for her tea. Ana Navarro's eyebrows shot up, and she bit the inside of her cheek to hide a grin. The stage floor crew exchanged quick glances, knowing they might need to signal for a commercial break sooner than planned. Joy, for once, didn't immediately jump back in. She tilted her head, lips pressed together, the faintest flicker of surprise crossing her face at the unexpected check. The tension now had a pulse, steady, deliberate, and unmistakably building. The studio air felt heavier now, almost humid with the tension between the two women. Joy shifted in her seat, her body turning toward Sunny like a boxer squaring up to an opponent. Her signature grin was there, but it had hardened, less playful, more like a dare. "Extreme, please," Joy said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "What's extreme is pretending we can tiptoe around this stuff and still call ourselves honest." She punctuated the sentence with a sharp flick of her hand, as if brushing away the accusation entirely. Sunny didn't break eye contact. Her posture was immaculate. Shoulders back, chin slightly raised, a calmness that contrasted sharply with Joy's animated gestures. "I'm not saying don't be honest," Sunny replied evenly. "I'm saying there's a point where passion tips into something else, something that loses credibility." The audience reacted with a mix of oohs and scattered applause, as if unsure whose side they were supposed to be on. A camera zoomed in on Joy's face, catching the slight narrowing of her eyes. Credibility, Joy repeated, leaning back in her chair and folding her arms. Sunny, my credibility comes from saying what other people are too scared to say. You can call it extreme, I call it reality. Sunny's lips curved into the faintest, knowing smile. She didn't rush her response. She let the silence stretch just long enough for Joy to fidget ever so slightly in her seat. Whoopi glanced between them like a referee watching two fighters circle. Ladies, she said softly, a hint of warning in her tone, but neither woman seemed ready to yield. In the control room, a producer muttered into their headset, do we let this play, or are we cutting to commercial? The stage manager just shook his head. This is the show right now. The audience knew it too. Every eye in the room was locked on the table. Not a cough, not a shuffle, just the electric quiet before someone threw the next verbal punch. The tension had settled into a tight coil, every second winding it just a little tighter. Joy leaned forward slightly, her fingers drumming on the table, ready to pounce on whatever came next. Sunny, however, didn't rush. She adjusted the papers in front of her with slow precision, glanced at the camera for a brief moment, just enough for the audience at home to feel the weight of what was about to happen, and then looked directly at Joy. Joy, Sunny began, her voice even but unyielding, sometimes the way you say things, it's like you've left reality at the door. It landed like a mic drop in slow motion. The words hung in the air for a beat too long, just enough for everyone to feel their sting. The audience gasped audibly, a mix of shock and giddy anticipation. A few people clapped, quickly and almost instinctively, then stopped, as if realizing they might be fueling a live meltdown. Joy blinked, momentarily thrown. Left reality at the, she started, then stopped herself. Her mouth closed, her lips pressed together in a thin line. It was rare to see her without an immediate counterpunch. Whoopi's eyes went wide as she slowly leaned back, coffee mug in hand, pretending to sip while very much not drinking. Ooh, she mouthed silently, the camera catching it in a perfect reaction shot. Ana Navarro raised her eyebrows so high they practically disappeared into her hairline. She looked between the two women, clearly entertained but wise enough to stay out of the line of fire. Sunny didn't smirk, didn't gloat, she just sat there, pen resting lightly in her hand, waiting. The silence felt intentional, almost surgical, as if she knew that not filling the air was the most powerful move she could make. Somewhere in the control room, a producer whispered, we're trending on Twitter already. And still, Joy said nothing, at least, not yet. The cameras caught every twitch in her expression, every subtle shift in her body language, as she decided whether to explode or retreat. For a moment, Joy simply sat there, her hands resting flat on the table, the camera catching the faintest tremor in her fingers. It wasn't fear, it was the telltale sign of someone holding back a retort so sharp it could cut glass. She opened her mouth, ready to launch into a comeback, but then, nothing. No words, just a faint exhale through her nose. Her eyes shifted briefly to the audience, who were still leaning forward in their seats like a crowd waiting for the verdict in a courtroom. A soft cough broke the silence from somewhere in the back row, and even that tiny sound seemed deafening in the stillness. Sunny remained perfectly still, her eyes on Joy, her expression neutral but unblinking. She had no need to press further, the absence of Joy's voice was speaking louder than any debate. Whoopi raised her eyebrows and glanced toward the camera, as if silently telling viewers at home, you're witnessing history, folks. The audience began to whisper, but not enough to break the spell. It was a surreal moment. Joy Behar, the woman who could talk through a hurricane, who had sparred with politicians and comedians alike, was silent. Joy reached for her mug, the clink of ceramic against the table ringing out across the set. She took a long, slow sip of coffee, eyes fixed downward, as though letting the warmth of the drink shield her from the weight of Sunny's words. The live audience didn't cheer. They didn't clap. They just watched, spellbound, unsure if Joy's quiet was the calm before a storm, or the rarest of all things on The View, surrender. In the control room, someone finally whispered, my God, she's not saying anything. The silence was still heavy in the studio, but it was beginning to feel less like a standoff and more like a truce neither side had agreed to out loud. Sunny, sensing the moment had reached its peak, let her posture relax just a fraction. She set her pen down on the table, folding her hands loosely in front of her. Her voice, when it came, was softer, measured, almost conciliatory. "We're here to have real conversations, Joy," Sunny said, looking her co-host in the eye. "Just, maybe without crossing into the absurd." Her words were gentle in tone but still edged with truth, like a velvet glove hiding steel. Joy didn't speak, but she did lift her head slightly, her eyes locking with Sunny's. It wasn't defiance this time, more like she was weighing the cost of firing back versus letting the moment pass. Her lips pressed together in a tight line, and the camera caught the faintest twitch of her jaw. The audience gave a few scattered laughs, not at Joy, not at Sunny, but at the awkward release of pressure in the air. It was the first sign that the tension might finally ease. Whoopi, who had been watching the whole thing like a cat watching two dogs argue, seized the opportunity to chime in with a low, playful hum. I see you two are making daytime TV spicy again," she quipped, sipping her tea. Ana Navarro gave a half smile, shaking her head as if to say, "Only on this show." The moment didn't fully diffuse. The spark between Joy and Sunny was still there, but it was cooling. Joy picked up her mug again, taking another deliberate sip, her shoulders loosening ever so slightly. In the control room, the director muttered, "All right, we can land this plane now." The audience clapped lightly, a collective breath of relief passing through the room. It wasn't exactly forgiveness, but it was enough to move forward without open flames. Whoopi glanced toward the stage manager at the edge of the set, catching the subtle hand signal that meant 2 minutes until commercial. She turned back to the table, eyes flicking between Joy and Sunny like a mother deciding it was time to end the sibling squabble before someone flipped the dinner table. With a wide, deliberate smile, she leaned into her microphone. "All right," she said, drawing the word out, "that's enough daytime drama for one morning." Her tone was warm but final, the verbal equivalent of slamming the gavel in a courtroom. The audience chuckled, grateful for the shift in energy. "Let's talk about something lighter," Whoopi continued, her grin widening. "Like cats in Halloween costumes. Yes, folks, tiny witches, tiny pumpkins, and even one that looked like Dracula." The big screen behind them lit up with the first image, a fluffy orange tabby in a black cape and fake fangs. The audience erupted in laughter, the tension from the previous segment dissipating like steam off a kettle. Ana Navarro leaned forward, giggling. "Okay, that one's cute, but I want to see the dog dressed like Elvis. Please tell me we have that picture." Sunny chuckled softly, her shoulders relaxing as she glanced at Joy. It wasn't an apology, but it was a small acknowledgement of shared humanity. Joy smirked, finally speaking for the first time in minutes. "You know, that Dracula cat has more bite than some of the politicians we talk about." The crowd roared with laughter, partly because it was funny, partly because it was a relief to hear Joy's voice again. The camera caught Whoopi shaking her head with a smile. "And on that note, we'll be right back." The applause swelled as the theme music played. Behind the smiles and chatter, the co-hosts sipped their drinks and shuffled papers, each of them knowing that while the cameras had moved on, the conversation between Joy and Sunny wasn't quite over, it was just on pause until the next round.